What's up, everybody? My name is Jacob Hardison, and today we're going to take a look at a couple batteries. So today we have a bit of a different video that we're going to do. We're going to be comparing a couple of different 4S batteries that I've gotten the opportunity to use. And then, of course, as you probably already could tell, the scenery is very different. I'm in the same general area of the shop, but we've moved around a lot of stuff. That way we can get prepped for a big race we have coming up this weekend. So I figured since everything else is moved around, we'll try a new location and see how it works out. So here we are. But to jump now back into today's video, we're going to, of course, take a look at these two batteries and do some comparing and contrasting. That way you guys have the information before you go out and buy a battery. As we know, there are tons and tons of different batteries on the market. So this is, of course, hitting a kind of small niche area at the moment. But over time, maybe I'll get to try some different batteries out and continue to give you guys that information so you get the best thing for your vehicle. So to kind of start us out here, first we'll just talk about what we have. So I've got the Spektrum Pro Series battery over here, which is going to be a 6500 high voltage 4S. And then over here, I have the Protek Graphene Plus, I think is what it's called, also 6500, also high voltage. So we are doing a pretty apples to apples comparison here because in theory, they should be the same spec. And I believe they're the same C rating as well. They're both 120C batteries. Now, for what you get inside the box with the Spektrum battery, of course, you've got the battery itself, and then you have a very, very important charge cable. This guy here is going to be required to charge this battery, whether you are on a Spektrum charger or any other charger on the market, because it does use a proprietary balance lead that, again, is going to be required if you want to use this battery. On the Protek side of things, you're going to have the same thing, the battery inside the box. It's going to come with a couple of 5mm bullets and then also some bullet reducers. So let's say you have a 4mm bullet, you need to bump up to 5mm. They do have that in there. I'm not the biggest fan of doing that on an 8-scale car, but if you have a 10-scale car, I guess you can save them for that. But they give you 5mm bullets, so I feel like you might as well just solder those guys on. The other thing that it's going to come with is going to be just a kind of industry standard 5-wire 4S balance wire for a bullet style battery. And that, of course, can be used with any charger, and you can find plenties of different options, whether you lose this one or not. It's not something that is going to be, of course, proprietary to the Protek end of things. Now, to kind of dive into that real quick, get that out of the way on the upfront, the Spektrum battery, because it's got that proprietary lead, you do get some extra data with it if you're using a Spektrum charger. But if you're not using a Spektrum charger, then that extra data is relatively useless in the grand scheme of things because you're never going to be able to read it. But if you are using a Spektrum charger with the Spektrum battery, then you do, of course, get all of the smart features, which is going to be, it'll start charging for you. It will data log all of the different overcharges, temperature stuff, whether it's been over discharged. And the other thing that is cool about it is you can set inside the battery what you want it to discharge to and when. So we'll dive into that with basically, let's say you charge it and you don't end up actually getting to use the battery. Then what it'll do is after X amount of time, whatever time you set it to, it will put itself back into storage mode. Whereas, of course, with the Protek battery, you don't get those extra smart features like the auto discharge or any of the data logging. But you do get a little bit more freedom of kind of what chargers you can use and what bits and pieces you can use to do the charging. Whereas the Spektrum, like we've said, is definitely a bit more finicky. Now that we've gotten kind of the main upfront things out of the way of the actual charging stuff, we will get more into the performance end now. So the majority of my driving that I've done with the Spektrum battery has been in my buggy. The majority of the driving that I've done with the Protek battery has been in my truggy. So there is a slight car difference there, but I feel like that the feeling between the two of them will be relatively negligible whether I run them in my buggy or my truggy. Runtime with my Spektrum battery and my buggy, I'm sitting right in the 12 to 13 minute area, and we're looking at about the same time here on the Protek battery and my truggy at that 12 to 13 minute area. Potentially, if I were to throw this Protek battery into my buggy, maybe I'd get a little bit more runtime out of it, but again, I feel like it's going to be pretty negligible. And then to further back that up, I do also want to say that my voltage cutoff in both cars is set the exact same. So we are, again, comparing apples to apples. We're not having any big changes at all. My voltage cutoff is set to 13.2 volts, which should be 3.3 volts per cell. In theory, you can go down to 3.2, but I just like to play on the safe side. And with both of them being set to the same voltage cutoff, again, we get a pretty good comparison of what our runtime is. At the charger, when it actually comes time to, of course, put stuff back into the battery, we do get a little more information. Both batteries will tell us the resistance on the charger. The Spektrum battery, I feel like, usually sits in the 3 to 5 ohm area, whereas the Protek battery usually sits a little bit lower, closer to that 1 to 2 ohm area. Granted, this battery is a little bit newer compared to this one, so that could play a slight factor into it. And with A-Skill Racing, honestly, those resistances aren't bad at all. If you were racing 10th skill stock buggy, then I would say that'd be something to worry about. But with A-Skill, the ohms and resistance in it isn't going to be super duper crazy to worry about. But I do want to give that reference, that way you get an idea of, you know, what kind of overall lifetime of the battery should be. In theory, with the lower resistance battery, the overall lifetime from the first charge to the 200 charge, or how many total charges you get on it, I would think that you would get more total charges on the lower resistance battery than the higher resistance battery. Now, to swap to probably the most important part of both of these guys, actually, I'll take one step back for just a moment since we were talking about charging. This one is rated to do 32.5 amps of charging. This one is rated to do 65 amps of charging. I don't know what crazy madman is charging that high for either of these batteries, but I figured I'd throw that out there. I charge both of them at 15 amps though, because I'm not crazy. Now that we've backpedaled that little bit, we can talk about, of course, the driving end of things. Both batteries, as I said, lifetime is about the same for start to finish of that single charge. But what I've noticed is, and with any high voltage battery, as it drops from the high voltage back into standard voltage, you'll have a slight drop in performance. That's going to be any high voltage battery. But what I have noticed is that throughout the pack on the Spektrum battery, it does seem like it gets a little bit more flat, and it's a more significant drop from one to the other as the pack goes on. So you kind of have to find this middle ground for your throttle endpoint if you do mess with that, just because what might have way too much power at the start of the pack, you know, maybe it's a little sluggish at the end of the pack. So for this one, I think I have to run at like 93, and that kind of gets a good bounce from the start to finish. Of course, you know, the endpoints and stuff, that'll be different from car to car, driver to driver. But the big point that I wanted to make there was that I do feel like this has a bit more aggressive of a drop. Swapping over to the Protek battery, that again is going to be the number one thing that I noticed, is that other than that initial drop from high voltage to standard voltage, this does not have nearly as aggressive of a drop. It definitely will feel a little bit less punchy, a little bit more soft towards the end of the pack, but I definitely feel like that the consistency of this battery is greater than this battery. Now, for a 5-minute run, that is going to make a huge difference, but definitely, you know, for an 8-minute or a 10-minute main on especially an outdoor track, but I mean really any track, having the consistent longevity of this battery I think is going to be nicer, because in theory, if you lose time going down a really long straightaway because the battery isn't as punchy, that could be, of course, catastrophic to potentially winning the race. Having straightaway power on a really long straight is important. Now, here at Adrenaline, for the testing that I did, my straightaway isn't ungodly long on the indoor track, so it's not a super crazy difference, but I think definitely an outdoor track at the end of the run, if I was in first with this battery and a guy was catching me in second with this battery, then I would be slightly more worried, just because in theory he'll have a little bit more punch. But again, that's going to really come down to gearing and like what your endpoints are. The main point of that, of course, being that I like the car to feel the same from start to finish, and I feel like I do get that a little bit more with the Protek battery compared to the Spektrum battery. So that kind of rounds us out a little bit of kind of what each battery does and what each battery is. Now, for each driver, again, I know I've said it a ton, it will be a little bit different, but this is from my personal experience. They both are gonna have their gives and takes. One thing, like I said earlier on in the video, it is nice to be able to do the data logging with this battery. You know exactly how many packs are on the car, and you can see all of the life of the battery, whereas of course you don't get that with this. And then you also get that auto charge and auto discharge feature with this, whereas you do have to do a little bit more work with this. So I think that in whole, looking at the entire picture, if you're somebody that isn't super battery savvy, you just want easy, and you just want to be able to mostly focus on driving, not spend a lot of time messing with the charger end of things, then I think the Spektrum battery is definitely a solid way to go. I believe at the moment of this video, these go for $140, and it is nice to have those extra features, again, if you are not super battery savvy. If you're willing to spend the extra couple seconds, I do think that the Protek battery as an overall race pack is a little bit nicer. It is a little bit more expensive. It's gonna be $150 at the time of this video, but I think that that is an on sale number, so that could go up a little bit. But again, at the time of this video, we're looking at $150, but I think that this is going to be a better long-term race pack. So as now another final kind of round out, I think for ease of use, go with the Spektrum battery. For the most overall performance, go with the Protek battery. Both batteries, in the grand scheme of things, are very solid options. I don't think if you choose one over the other, that you're gonna be like, wow, I really wish I went with the other battery. They're both gonna be very solid, and for the majority of drivers, they're gonna do everything that you need to do. Really just comes down to whether you like the extra technology with the Spektrum battery, or if you just want that little bit of potential extra performance with the Protek battery. So I hope that this has been useful for you guys. A lot of information. And again, like I said earlier, I want to, over time, try more and more batteries out and give you guys, of course, the most information. This one definitely pertaining more to the 8-scale end of things, but I think in the future, I'm gonna try and dabble back into the 10-scale end of things. That way we can get you guys even more knowledge out there into the internet. If there's anything that you want me to go over more with these batteries, definitely feel free, leave them in the comment section below. At the very moment, I do have these guys in stock at Adrenaline, and I've got a couple of these guys on order. So both are gonna be available on our website, adrenalinrcracing.com, if you didn't already know. Thank you for joining me today, and we'll see you in the next one.